welcome to Still Speak Podcast. This is episode 3 of my Kaitlyn Conley series. If you missed the first 2 episodes, go check those out. And for the rest, we're going to dive in. I weeded through the entire trial transcripts for both of the trials of Kaitlyn Conley. It was thousands and thousands of pages, and I went through, I read it all, and I picked out what I felt was relevant to discuss. There was a lot of, basic questions for each witness that took the stand that we really have no need for. So I skipped over those types of things. And I focused heavily on Adam Yoder, Bill Yoder, and Kathy, Mary's sister, who began an affair with Bill, Mary's husband, after her death, and a few other important people in the transcripts. Now, 45 people took the stand in the first trial alone. We'd be here forever if we went over every single one of these at roughly 200 pages or more per testimony. So I weeded it out and I got a list of what, we need to discuss. In this episode, I'm going to go over Adam's testimony in the first trial, and then we're going to be discussing what he said in the second trial. And I'm going to be doing the same for Bill, his father, Adam's father, in a future episode, and then an episode about a few other people's testimony and what has happened since then. So this will be a multiple part series. So let's discuss Adam. This will be from the first trial. They went over his college history, and it's important because it gives a backstory on Adam before, during, and after his mother was murdered. Adam said that he attended Mohawk Valley Community College for about 2 years, and the prosecutor asked if it was safe to say that he went to this community college from fall of 2007 until spring of 2009, and Adam said yes. He was then asked what he went there for, and he answered the first year he went there, he majored in digital animation, and his second year he majored in theater. He said he took a break from MVCC and returned to it a year later in the spring of 2010, and he stayed there for only 1 semester. He then left again and went back for a third time in the fall of 2011, over a year later. And he stayed this time for 2 semesters and half of a third semester. In the fall of 2012, he dropped out of that semester midway, and he blamed transportation because he lived a bit away, and he also didn't like his major, so he dropped out. Adam then attended SUNY Polytechnic in the fall of 2014, and he did 2 full semesters, fall of 2014 and spring of 2015. And this was the semester right before his mother's death. He says he did not complete the fall semester because of his mother's death, so he was not emotionally stable enough. But you will see as we go forward that he took a ton of trips between his mother passing and that fall semester of 2015. So it's debatable if he indeed stopped due to the grief or, another reason or a mixture of both. You'll see as we continue. Adam was then bombarded with a dozen questions about his phone numbers and Kaitlyn's numbers and email addresses. And then, a ton of questions about how him and Kaitlyn met and began dating. And he said he met Kaitlyn in the summer of 2011 at her high school graduation party. A friend of his, Mike Baker, brought him to the party. And Adam said him and Kaitlyn started dating exclusively early September 2011. So this was a short time after meeting one another at the graduation party. He said the relationship lasted for 2 years before they broke up the first time. This brings us to early September of 2013. Adam, sitting on the witness stand, said that Kaitlyn was unhappy with the relationship for a long time, and she had told him that many times. Now, keep this in mind because we discussed that the prosecution's claim that Kaitlyn's motive was to get back at Adam for hurting her. Now, this is 2 years prior, but it shows even from Adam's own mouth, It was Kaitlyn who wanted to end the 2-year relationship the first time. Adam claims he thought they were getting back together at one point shortly after that, though, but then he believed, and that's a key word, believed, that she had sex with his friend Aaron. He did not elaborate on why he thought this at this particular time. Aaron was a good friend of his and his gym partner. Adam was then asked a series of questions after this about moving, and he said he moved from one place in October of the same year, so 2013, shortly after they broke up. And at this time, he had contact with Kaitlyn again because he had to give up cats to move to his new place, and she went over there to help transport these cats to a farm. And if you recall, we discussed Kaitlyn is or was an animal lover and rescued many of them. And at that time, Adam claims that Kaitlyn cried and said she still wanted to be with him, and his response was, "No, we're not getting back together." Why not? Kaitlyn was the one to break it off after complaining about the relationship many times. Now she had a change of heart, and he's saying no? That's odd. Although he does mention seeing someone around this time briefly, but still, Kaitlyn and him had a 2-year relationship and only had broken up for about 2 months. Why was this an automatic no? A month later, Adam got a text from Kaitlyn late at night saying she had driven herself to the hospital because she had had an ectopic pregnancy that had to be terminated immediately. For those who don't know what that type of pregnancy is, it's a pregnancy in when the fertilized egg implants outside the uterus, and the fertilized egg can't survive outside the uterus. If left to grow, it can damage nearby organs and cause life-threatening loss of blood. And symptoms include pelvic pain and vaginal bleeding and what have you. And to prevent complications, treatment is needed. In the early stages, medication can be used, but in later stages, you may need some surgery. I personally didn't know what an ectopic pregnancy was until I was in my late 20s, about to have my first child, while learning about pregnancy and what my body was going to be going through. And I had come upon information about them in a pregnancy forum. I had no real reason to know about what it was prior, I had no reason to know what that was. So, Kaitlyn was 20 at the time, so if this was a lie or a stunt to get Adam's attention, why say an ectopic pregnancy? Why not just claim a miscarriage? Many, young women have used a miscarriage to get a man's attention or, manipulate them before. It's wrong, but they have. So why go as far as to say that it was an ectopic pregnancy if it's not true? Now, Adam did mention that she met up at his apartment the next day after this, and that Kaitlyn was upset. And he had consoled her, and Adam expressed he was upset too because this was the first he heard of the pregnancy, and he was hurt thinking he just lost a child he never knew he was going to have. For some knowledge, ectopic pregnancies are usually found between 4 and 12 weeks of pregnancy. More often than not, it's by the 6th week that you know about it, which means that Kaitlyn may not even have known yet herself, because typically you find out you're pregnant around the 4 to 6 week mark. After this, Kaitlyn and Adam got back together in November of 2013, and this time the relationship lasted until August of 2014. Now, this would be 11 months prior to his mother's death. But in January of 2014, 7 months prior to the second breakup, Adam took a loan from Kaitlyn after she offered to do such in the amount of $12,000. This was because Kaitlyn said he was paying a ton of interest, so she was going to pay off his debt, and he can pay her back when he was able to at a lower interest rate. They were to set up a bank account for Adam to deposit money into so he could keep track of what he paid back. And what was paid was $6,000 in credit card debt and $6,000 in student loans. But it didn't stop there. In the spring of 2014, so just a few months later, after the $12,000 loan, Kaitlyn gave him $3,000 to buy a 1991 Jeep Wrangler, and she even drove him from New York State to Pennsylvania to get this car that he found on Craigslist. And Adam claims in August, when the relationship ended, it was his choice because it was not a relationship he wanted to be in for long. Now, mind you, this is after he took $15,000 from her. After she offered. But gosh, if you didn't want a long relationship with this person, why would you accept this offer? He claimed he was also going back to school, so, the mixture of the two, he ended the relationship. She did pay off his older student debt, so I guess he was okay with, getting more student loans. And Adam says Kaitlyn was very upset about this breakup. According to Adam, the two talked on and off into November of 2014 as friends, when he then talked to her about his concerns about someone named Aaron. And now this is the Aaron that I mentioned earlier, that he believed that she was sleeping with him when they dated the first time. Now, he did not elaborate on this, but went on to say they started a friendship, meeting up often until it slowed down because he still had feelings for her. So it was hard to meet up with her. Huh? Did he not just say he did not want to be in the relationship long term and he ended it? Confused, but okay, Adam. Moving forward, here, a bunch of questions were asked about a time frame that he worked at his parents' practice along with Kaitlyn. And for a period of time back in 2012, they jumped, back now to May of 2015. And Adam says he went to see his mother on Mother's Day at her home, and his Aunt Kathy and Grandma were there. Now note this, because this is the sister of Mary's who started to date Bill, Mary's husband, after Mary's death, although that is up for debate because some witnesses saw them together prior to Mary's death. But anyways, this Aunt Kathy spent Mary's last Mother's Day on Earth with her at her home in the presence of Bill. Adam admitted later that day through text messages he and his mother had an argument. My mother texted me that night to ask if everything was all right, he said, and they could tell I was visibly off. I was struggling with some of my own things, so I preferred not to really talk about it, and we had a disagreement. Now, June of 2015, Kaitlyn just had a texting kind of friendship with Adam, and at this point, Adam had not paid back this loan that she had given him, and so Kaitlyn texted him about paying it back, and he was confused because she said $22,000 when the original loan was $12,000 and the car was $3,000, so that's $15,000. And I have to wonder if this was a mistype and Kaitlyn actually meant $12,000. I don't know. But he wanted to meet up with her to discuss it. And so they met up and began to discuss the loan. And the terms were that when he started working and making money, he would pay it back a percentage of what he'd be making, and they would have to agree upon that interest rate. According to Adam, she broke down in the middle of them talking about this loan and started to cry because she was afraid that he would leave and never message her again. And he said, I told her, that's not what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to finish my degree so I can start working and pay you back this loan. Now, July 2015, the month his mother, Mary Yoder, died, Adam drove to Long Island from New York State to see his sister and her family for his niece's birthday, and his parents were supposed to go to a birthday party on July 25th there as well, except Mary Yoder died on July 22nd. He claimed that he did not tell Kaitlyn about this trip, and he had not spoken to her during the month of July until his mother fell ill late in the month. Now, considering Kaitlyn was still working at his parents' office, I'm sure Kaitlyn was aware that Adam was out of town and that Mary had plans to go to her granddaughter's birthday party, but I don't know. I mean, Mary and Kaitlyn were close enough, enough that she was mentioned in Mary's obituary. I don't know for sure if she knew, but I'm just saying it's possible she knew this through Mary. And Adam was out there July 15th, 16th, 17th, 18th, 19th, and 20th, which is the day that Mary got sick. And he was there until July 21st, when they were being told by their father that their mother had been hospitalized. Adam then left Long Island on the 21st because the next day his father was going to cover Mary's patients, and Adam was going to sit with his mother. This is interesting because from all accounts, Mary declined rapidly and they owned the practice. Why would Bill open a clinic instead of just canceling appointments to stay by his wife's side? Granted, that's what ended up happening, but that's not what the initial plan was. So on the morning of the 22nd, the day Mary died, he got a call from his dad that overnight Mary had fallen in her hospital room and was now in ICU. He threw his clothes on and he headed to the hospital, and he went to his mother's room, but Mary could not communicate verbally. She couldn't even write, and her arms and hands were swollen. He was asked if he had called anyone, and he said he did call, guess who? Kaitlyn, when he was on the way to the hospital. And he said he was panicking, and Katie knew his mother, and Kaitlyn was the closest female to him at that time that he can think of reaching out to. At one point when he was at the hospital, he asked Kaitlyn to take him to Barnes & Noble's because he wanted to get his mom gardening magazines. He said he didn't know, he was just panicking and getting whatever he could to help her through this. He didn't know what to do. So Kaitlyn showed up to take him to Barnes & Noble's. Okay, that's fair. I mean, it's his mom, right? And he's overwhelmed. Okay. But he said her hands were swollen and her arms, and that she couldn't verbally communicate and she couldn't even write. So, I mean, how was she going to sit there and flip through a magazine? And why did he need Kaitlyn to take him to Barnes & Noble's? He drove himself to the hospital. But anyways, they went to Barnes & Noble's and then they went to Michael's. He was asked why, and he said, my mother had her 60th birthday back in March, and I had planned on doing an art project with my two sisters. And in my panic, not thinking clearly, I tried doing it for her back at the hospital. What? Her birthday was in March. This is July. Okay, so that's bizarre, in my opinion, but we all redact differently, so it's plausible. They returned to the hospital, and Kaitlyn stayed in the lobby. Other family members started to show up, and so Kaitlyn continued to wait in the lobby. He would text her with updates and go to the lobby to actually tell her updates on and off, and then they left the hospital again, this time to pick up a painting that he made for his mother for Mother's Day back in May. And his explanation here was he was desperate. He didn't know. And this painting was apparently at his parents' home, and he wanted to take Kaitlyn's car to go get this painting. But his sister did not want him driving in his emotional state, so Kaitlyn took him. Why would he want Kaitlyn's car? Kaitlyn met him at the hospital. His car was in the parking lot. Again, I'm saying his car was in the parking lot. So he had her come to take him to Barnes & Noble's instead of taking his own car. Then he wanted her car. But then his sister was like, no, I don't want you driving. And then, but this is like weird. Like, why was this happening if his car was in the parking lot? But anyways, they go back to the hospital, and at one point, he told Kaitlyn basically, there's no point sitting around all day. He didn't know what was going to happen. And so Kaitlyn leaves, and she called him shortly after, saying that she was sitting in her car crying because she said that his mother was not just important to him, and that she was upset that she couldn't go in the room to see her. So he felt bad, and he told Kaitlyn to come back in so that, she can visit with his mother. And then, they went upstairs. They weren't actually allowed in the room, but they were outside the room in the vicinity of where she was. And a little while passed, and Mary Yoder coded several times and passed with all her loved ones in the building. Both Kaitlyn and Adam left the hospital together at some point but in separate cars. Kaitlyn followed behind him back to his apartment. They spent several hours together before he went to his parents' house. Adam went to Long Island again to help his sister on an emotional level shortly after this. And then the sister, Adam and Kaitlyn, began to plan Mary's celebration of life, which was held the same day Mary's granddaughter was supposed to have her birthday party, which was July 25th of 2015. Kaitlyn purchased some items for the celebration of life of Mary Yoder. Yeah. So not only was this girl mentioned in the obituary, but she helped plan and buy some items for the celebration of life of Mary Yoder. And the night of the celebration of life for Mary, Adam and Kaitlyn had sex. And it was the sister who later pays Kaitlyn back for those items. All that week, Kaitlyn and Adam were together at his parents' house, and she was there helping and consoling him and the family. Adam and Bill decided to, Adam said, my dad was going, but then he invited me along to visit his side of the family in both Santa Monica and Phoenix. Before doing that, though, they went to Long Island again. Kaitlyn and Adam went first, and Bill met them there a few days later. They spent the week in Long Island. Then about a week in Santa Monica and a week in Arizona near Phoenix. After Long Island, Kaitlyn had went back home, and then Adam flew to Santa Monica. So she did not go with them to these two states. Adam flew back home alone, and Kaitlyn picked him up from the airport. During his testimony, it was said that his sister was acting as a liaison with the medical examiner's office. Mind you, the sister is a doctor, but Bill Yoder has 2 doctorate degrees and was a chiropractor. Why was the sister doing this and sharing the information with Bill and not the other way around? That's a little odd, don't you think? The prosecutor then asked a bunch of basic type questions, and at one point it was mentioned that when Mary was hospitalized, Kaitlyn told them the only thing Mary had to work that day that she was aware of was a protein shake, and she shared this because everyone was trying to figure out what was making Mary so sick. By September of 2015, the duo were back in a relationship. Mid-September, Bill and Adam drove to New York City to meet up with his sister and her family for a walk for Down syndrome because one of the sister's children has Down syndrome. On the way to this walk is when Bill told Adam that his mother's death was not an accident and that she had died from colchicine. Adam claims that he never heard about colchicine, which is more believable than Bill saying he never heard of it, but moving on. So the question goes to how his sister was trying to collect her mother's supplements so they can be sent off for testing for any cross-contamination. And at one point, Adam wanted to help her efforts, and this is where the story about going to the office to ransack it for evidence comes into play that I mentioned in episode 2. Adam's version was that Kaitlyn seemed uninterested in helping while at the same time he wasn't telling her any information on what he was looking for or why he needed to collect these items, or even telling her the name of what killed his mother. So he was frustrated with her for grabbing things that he didn't want, but he never told her what he was hoping to find. I mean, sheesh, how was she supposed to know without much detail? I mean, the only real guidance he gave, to her was that he wanted anything that could be contaminated. Ultimately, the sister that, Kaitlyn got a hold of during this got upset with him over it because she was worried about him violating HIPAA laws because he was around patient charts. Kaitlyn had said he wanted to look through patient files, so this confirms what Kaitlyn says. And he left without anything from the office that night, but he went back a few days later with permission to grab almond milk from the fridge that he brought to the medical examiner's office. This was roughly 2.5 months after Mary died. The version in the court documents that I read in the last episode was Kaitlyn's side of the story, and the detail that was added in hers was that Adam had threatened her if she didn't help, that he would get her fired. And then the next 10 pages or so of his testimony is about the police searching his car in December of 2015 after receiving the anonymous letter pointing to Adam as Mary's murderer. And then basically not much was said other than, him describing where they searched in the car and what he witnessed them finding and making him describe each thing that was found. There was a load of questions about the almond milk and, we only need to know what was found. The items listed in the anonymous letter, and he admitted his car was filled with trash and that he took the almond milk to the medical examiner's office. We don't really need to know what the carton looked like and how much was in it, blah, blah, blah. But this is really interesting to me because Bill and Adam, and we're going to discuss this, they turned in their devices. And I said this in the last episode, and we're going to discuss it further. The police didn't confiscate it from them, okay? And even this almond milk, it was Adam who brought this almond milk to the medical examiners. And it was the sister who collected the supplements and brought it to them. Why was this stuff not being investigated and taken from investigators taking it? This is really odd, don't you think? That's not normal operations. You don't typically have people who can be possible suspects turn stuff in. You know what I mean? But anyway, in November of 2015, so now 4 months from when Mary had died, Bill Yoder called his kids together, this time including the second sister, and this is when he told them about the fact he was dating their Aunt Kathy, Mary's sister. Adam was asked if he was shocked, and he said no. They then skip this part and go to, more talk about the day he was called down to the station and the anonymous letter. Court ended, and the next morning they go right back to when Adam said no to the question on if he was shocked about his dad dating his aunt after being married to his mother for 40 years. He was asked why he was not shocked, and he said, I had known that she was comforting him, and they were spending time together. And so when he asked me, he asked all of us kids to meet at his house, I put 2 and 2 together and realized he's going to tell us he's in a relationship. And I was fine with that. Okay. Mary's family was not okay with it. This is obviously awkward and weird. Not only had Mary suddenly died, at 60 years old, but they just had found out that it wasn't an accident, that somebody intentionally poisoned her with colchicine, and now they're finding out that their sister is dating Mary's husband of, 40-something years. So they're besides themselves over it. But why would Bill tell the kids this? Why not just keep it a secret? Some can look at this and say, well, at least he was transparent, but it's their mother, and she just died unexpectedly, and quickly 4 months prior. What is telling them that you're dating their aunt, didn't go as easy as, hey, I'm cool with it, and it really actually upset them. And 4 months in and already wanting to let the kids know about it, what was the rush? I personally think this could have waited, but it goes back to my gut feeling that this relationship was happening before Mary passed, in my opinion, of course. So Adam says during his interview in December of 2015, he gave cops all texts between him and his father like they had asked. He was then asked if he gave ones with Kaitlyn over, and he said a few days later. So this sounds like they did not take his physical phone, this is another thing that is not typical, and he's the one who actually gave the police the text messages. I couldn't believe this, to be honest with you. I'm sure it's happened before, but you don't hear about it often. It was disclosed that after meeting with detectives, Adam immediately left the area to go stay with his sister in Long Island after a request from the detectives only returning at times to meet with detectives again. They told him not to elaborate on exactly what the request was. And if you recall, I mentioned in episode 2 that the website set up for Kaitlyn said that, Bill and Adam, like I said earlier too, turned their devices over. They were not taken from their possession, meaning they could have left out devices and no one would have known. Well, at this point in court is when Adam mentions turning in devices on his own, which matches what Kaitlyn's family has claimed. They then confronted him on the stand about the letter of intent that was sent out to purchase the colchicine, and they showed him the letter, and of course he denies seeing it, signing it, or ordering it, or forging any signatures. He also denies knowing the company it was bought from. They moved on to Adam's phone, and it was uncovered that Kaitlyn and Adam shared a Apple ID at one point starting in 2012, and this was so if one downloaded apps, the other can get it too, and that when they broke up, he told her to stop using it. He was unsure if she ever did or not. He was asked if he ever removed her, and he said he didn't know how to. Which, come on. A simple Google search or a YouTube search, even in 2013, 14, and 15, would have told you how to do that. Later in his testimony, he was confronted about how he had built several computers from scratch and had taken very high-level math classes and was in school at Polytechnic for bachelor's in computer science before they hit him hard, saying, "A person with your background and knowledge could not figure out how to remove a user from their Apple ID account?" They were running with this as, trying to make it seem that it was intentional he left her there, because later we know evidence turned up on one of the devices. Adam then admits that he had a drinking problem up until fall of 2014 for 3 or 4 months. He did not drink at all, and then he started to again on occasion, and he admits this problem was during his relationship with Kaitlyn. He sought counseling after the death of his mother, and he was diagnosed with PTSD. He was prescribed an antidepressant and Klonopin, which is a medicine that slows the brain, making the user relax. Many take it for panic attacks or anxiety. He said that prior that he had been on a mild antidepressant, which would have been during the time he was heavily drinking. He also said yes to smoking marijuana on occasion. Then Adam was asked a series of blah-type questions before they got to asking him about a storage unit that his cousin David King, who is the son of the sister that's one of the sisters that's trying to help Kaitlyn. David got this storage unit while Adam was away in Long Island after he met with police in December of 2015. Allegedly, David put Adam's stuff in this storage unit without his permission, according, of course, to Adam. Adam was presented picture exhibits of some of the items that he left behind, but when he hurried to Long Island, but many of them were pictures of medication, and Adam identifies a prescription of his that he didn't know the name of because it was abbreviated, and he didn't know why it was prescribed to him. He then identified tramadol, which is said to be for pain relief. The next he identified was montelukast, which is used to prevent symptoms of asthma. And then he identified an allergy medication. Lastly, he said 2 were generic name prescriptions for Adderall. Then 3 bottles of citalopram, which is a minor SSRI. If you do not know what an SSRI is, that's a video in itself. So go learn the good, the bad, and the ugly about those at a different time. But it's basically a serotonin reuptake inhibitor. Adam then identified his asthma inhaler and his Advair for asthma as well, like his mother had also used. Then some supplements and creatine and protein powders. Adam then admits that he had spied on Kaitlyn after he had suspicions of her being with that Aaron friend. He said he downloaded her phone to his computer because her phone was having issues, and he was getting ready to get a new one, and so he backed it up on his computer. He was asked if she asked him to or if he offered, and he said he offered to do it. However, he said he did not spy on her until a year after having her information on his computer. I'm not totally sure I believe that. But that's what he said. In fall of 2014, shortly after they broke up, he got a new phone and he hooked it up to his computer, and it said there was a backup and it was her information, so he restored it to his phone. At one point, he confronted her about what he found, and he said that was that, and they moved on from it. This was Adam's testimony, so his account of what transpired the years prior to and during the time of his mother's death. We have to keep in mind that he was drinking heavily around this time, and that can distort much of his recollection. And there was also Adderall at play here too. In the next episode, I'm going to be talking about what was said in the second trial by Adam in comparison to what was said in the first, or if there was additional information shared. I'm going to record that one immediately after this one. Until then, I'll see you soon.